Right, good morning to you all.
Good morning.
For those of you who haven't yet found out who I am, I'm that fellow that speaks funny. He comes from really far south Texas. Texas stretches all the way down to southern Africa. Background, born, bred in Africa. We played with bees down there. We didn't know they were dangerous and anything else like that since I found out when I came here. It was just something we did, not a problem. Came to the States in '94. While I was in South Africa, I worked basically as an engineer, but did a lot of part-time game ranging out there. My claim to fame is in the 10 years I game ranged, I never shot an animal, but I came very close to shooting some tourists that wouldn't listen to me. Long story cut short, and I live in Texas, just outside San Antonio. I've been there for 17 odd years. I started getting involved in the environment and nature when I went along to A&M. I wanted to do veterinary science. I've always wanted to do veterinary science. My marks at school weren't good enough, so I couldn't qualify in South Africa. When I spoke to A&M, they said, no, you're too old to do the course, but would you like to give the course for us? And I said, but I want to learn the course. They said, well, you've got enough college credits to give the course for us, so please go down to our extension office in Guadalupe County and deliver the vet science course for the 4-H and FAA kids. So that's how I started getting involved in this. Very soon it became clear that they were more interested in keeping bees, probably for their ag exempt, than anything else, so we started beekeeping. So I felt, well, if I'm going to teach beekeeping, I might as well keep my own hives. And with the first year was just learning all about it before I finally got my first hive, and that's where I found Dee and came along to this conference. And yes, I did want to learn a lot about treatment free. I couldn't understand why we had to treat animals. If they were healthy, why did we have to? It just didn't make sense. The other issue I had around San Antonio, that unless I was part of the local brotherhood, I was not welcome in the bee club. So we had to do something different. Learning about bees was to me the easy part of it, as long as I could find the information. The hardest part was being accepted in the community as a treatment-free beekeeper. You know, as Dee often says, you walk around with a big target on your back and front, and they will shoot to the other side they can. So after the first conference we had here, the task we took away with us, how do we get ourselves accepted into the local community where people start listening to us so that we can carry the message to them on how to do treatment free, and at the same time your bees will survive and you will make money. So that's where this idea for this presentation came from. It's not necessarily to give you a lot of bee information, but describe the journey we went through of earning the right to be heard and followed in the local community. The strategy to influence people there was, well, adults are a lost cause, so who else is the best ones to listen to? If you make it fun, the kids will listen. So work with the kids as much as we possibly could and use them to influence the adults. That was a tactic I used when I ran the refinery down in Texas. I could not get the people in the refinery to be safety conscious. In fact, many of them depended on the money that they got paid out when they got injured. So I told my safety department to rather go and deliver the safety message to the schools, which we offered free of charge. And we did that, and we had a huge success. The kids pressurized the parents to be safe at work. So that was my strategy. The same thing with beekeeping. To be accepted amongst non-believers, I had to find some way where the treating beekeepers would listen to me rather than just laugh me off as that freak from somewhere else. So I had to do something that was going to be impress them so they would listen to me. Then the next thing I had to do is I had to find local mentors. There weren't any, and so we decided to set up our own. With a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, we called ourselves Bees in the East side of San Antonio, because the other club was on the west side. And so just to rub it in a little bit, we did that. Probably the only thing I've really learned about democracy is democracy only works when the voting population are educated. So guys, here in the States, you've got a long way to go. A long way to go. So education was going to be the key focus of educating everybody in what is treatment free and why can it be successful, and to get away from the paradigms they currently have that things have to be treated. To get recognized, I had to start publishing. So I started writing articles for any editor in our local newspapers, journals, magazines in the area. It doesn't matter who read them, all about beekeeping. And the article first of all had to start about killer bees and Africanized bees and all this stuff. And what I found out very quickly is that the whole slogan of Africanized bees actually works. Hollywood was right. I go and tell people, you got bees, don't you think they're Africanized? And of course, panic sets out. What do we do? I said, don't worry, I come from Africa. I know how to deal with them. And I get the job every time. The other issue is, okay, so now I've set my target audience of kids. I have to think about, at some stage, I've got to involve the adults. And so I needed to get an audience that were willing to listen to me, or who had been cornered and had to listen to me. So the next focal point was to start approaching companies, institutions, church organizations, people like that hold dinners and banquets and things like that. They all need guest speakers. So if I come up with something interesting enough and fun enough and start getting a reputation to be an interesting speaker, I'll get some assignments to go and speak to them. Whether they paid or not was immaterial. That would be nice if they did. But the main focus was to spread the word that forget about Africanized and killer don't go together. They're not the same thing. We don't have to worry about the bees. In fact, you have a higher percentage chance of being killed by lightning than you do by bees. And most of the people in our area that die of bees is because they've got weak organs because of other reasons. And that's starting to work. I think last year we ended up doing 43 presentations throughout the year as a club, not all by me. And it's starting to have an impact. We are hearing people talk about what we're doing. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you have to have the proof that this really works. So we needed to establish apiaries in that area to be able to take people to them and show them what do small bees look like and what is our success rate, and get people comfortable with the fact that they are okay. So we established what we've called educational apiaries in 2 of the counties, Carmel County and Guadalupe County. And we use them for education. Fortunately, they are next to huge trees, so we do outside teaching under the trees, and then right next to us are the apiaries, and then once we've learned something, we're going to have a look. Probably our more successful events out there are 24-hour campouts for kids and their parents. I'm not paid to babysit, the parents got to do that. We get them to arrive about noon, we establish our tents there, we give them 2 hours education on bees, and then we take them into the apiaries, and they open a hive and they have a look. And we've got these kids with oversized bee suits having a look in, and then they're carrying the hives, carrying the frames, and then they're carrying the bees. And these are kids that were freaking out beforehand that we were going into bees because their parents had told them that this is the worst thing in the world, even worse than automatic rifles. And we had to overcome that psychological brainwashing that had been going on with the kids. But once we got that, it was great. We also mentor the 4-H projects for beekeeping and host school outings. We do combined events with other like organizations. We do a lot with the BatCon International, the Bat Conservatory. In fact, we used a lot of their land as well for beekeeping. So it's getting out into the community to be seen as part and parcel of the community. So Bees in the East is a club we established for anybody that wants to come along. And the first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make a club that people were interested in. So every time I went to a bee club meeting, 3/4 of the time was taken up with running a club and the other politicking, and maybe 15 minutes or half an hour of actual beekeeping. So we said right up front, there are no officials, there's no fees, there's nothing of that. We have a 2-hour meeting and you get 2 hours of beekeeping and then lots of question and answers after that. And that's worked out very well. We started very slowly, and now we're growing pretty fast. We're almost as big as the other bee club in town. We've established a list of local mentors. And in our area, because we're so desperate for mentors, you've had a beehive for about a year, great, you're on the mentor list. When I established my hives here, even though I had some experience from Africa, when things started happening and I didn't know why, who do I call to? I could phone and describe what I think I'm seeing, but I don't know what I'm seeing. I don't really know what to be looking for. So having a mentor that will actually come and visit you at your house and look at your apiary, or hold your hand while you're busy doing your first inspection or doing what else you want to do, helps you hugely so. It gives a lot of morale boost to the person doing it. So our mentors will travel. So you call up and you say, I need some help. I'm like, what's your address? Right, who's the closest mentor? Contact them. Are you prepared to go? Can you go along? And most of the time they say sure. So that's been a really great success of influencing the locals into let's go treatment free. And every time one of the beekeepers said to us, well, now, will you help me with treatment? I said, well, I'll give you a phone number of another beekeeper that I know does treating, but we know nothing about treating. We're not interested. It's not necessary. We don't do it. We also do education. We prepare people for the state exams, and I'll tell you a bit more about that later on. We've also partnered with the extension officers in the 4 counties in our area, and we work with AgLife there to help run their meetings. So they do the meetings, they do all the logistics of setting up the training courses, and we just go and deliver them or help out with the practical. And that's great. We don't have to worry about the administration, the financing, who gets the lunch and all that and the other stuff. They do that. And they like using us because we provide practical hands-on experience at the level of the beginners. And then usually we do 2 courses, the beginner entry course, and then we do what we call the second steps course, which is aimed at people who have had hives for at least 2 years. The intention is to start providing local queens and nukes into the area. Despite what you hear from Texas, it is the center of the universe. We've had up until now a really nice state apiarist in charge. Unfortunately, he's gone off to the East Coast for more money. But when he started seeing California banning feral colonies and you had to burn them if it was so-called identified African, and then he saw Florida do the same thing, he immediately issued a statement out to say all feral bees in Texas are Africanized. Get with it, boys, they're all there. He and I went down to South Africa 3 years ago, and spent quite a lot of time with the beekeepers down there. And we also spent a really useful day with the head apiarist for South Africa. And his bottom line to us, hey, you sissies that live in the United States, get with the program. Your future bees are the feral bees. Get with the program and learn how to manage them now, because it's going to come to you later on where you have to manage them. They're going to be the survivors. So in Texas, what they've done is they've made it difficult for us to get treatments for bees now. If you want a treatment for a bee, you have to get a vet prescription. And most of the vets are not trained to do it. So guess what? You either do it under the table, or you have to really find a vet. And they're now slapping on an import duty to bring any bees into the state. They're trying to encourage us to use our local bees. This year should be our first year where we will be having local queens and nukes, which will all be small cell treatment-free bees initially for the club to use. And the idea is slowly to expand as our numbers increase. We could not get on any of the beekeeping websites or memberships or any of the organizations in Texas unless we became members of them. Of course, we didn't have fees for the club, so eventually we decided last year to bite the bullet, to ask for donations, and we became members. So there's San Antonio, there's the headquarters of the other club. We're actually a little bit further out, but there's us now. We're now on the map, and since being on the map, our membership has gone up quite significantly. What we've also spent a lot of time doing is trying to educate the public on what is honey. It's not the stuff you buy in the store. That's just sweetened sugar water. And so we spent quite a bit of time with it. And the idea is that the honey sales that we make, and that we don't keep bees for honey. If there's a surplus, we take the honey. But the sales we make for honey, we plow back into education and research in our area. So we've now set the honey price up. I think I've got a slide later. I'll leave it until then and talk about it. But the impact of finally now being on the map has made a big difference. And I think that we will now continue to grow. There's many things I learned from Dee. Most of them I forgot, but don't tell her. The distance that the bees fly, at least the small cell bees fly, was an important thing for this map. She said somewhere around between 8 and 10 miles from a hive. So I've set up circles on this map of 7 miles. Why? Just because they just overlapped. And what she also told me to do is start setting up apiaries where there is a slight overlap. So hopefully the drones from one area would mate with your queens in the other. And that's what we've done here. So our first apiary was set up in that area. There came our second apiary. There was our third apiary. So now we're getting some overlap. Tell you a bit about these apiaries. This is in a 6,000 acre nature reserve. So we will, unfortunately in Texas, Texas is not a good state for honeybees, at least where we are. There is no food, very little food for them. Our nectar flow starts in about a week's time, and we'll go through to the end of April. Then there is nothing for them, right through until September. And September, October, we'll get 2 weeks of nectar flow. That's it. And what I've also since learned is that, yes, we have cedar pollen, and we have usually very high pollen loads in the air, but there's not a lot of pollen for the bees. We've seen a significant change in growth of our hives when we started providing pollen into the apiaries. So that's another beautiful area. There's not a lot of food there. I originally had, I think, 25 hives in that area. I've cut it down to a maximum of 10. And because if I go any more than that, I have to start feeding the bees. This one was just set up from a friendly farmer. He had a tree come down. He asked me to come remove the bees because they were too big. They were so big that not even I would remove them from the tree. So what we did is we took his front end loader, we tied the tree to it, and we drove down the highway with this tree dangling down the road into the apiary, and that's where we put it, and it's still there. This apiary here is an interesting one. I'll probably repeat myself later on. It's in part of the Green Space Alliance that San Antonio has. It's run as a non-profit by the city, and we've got the rights now to put apiaries in all their green spaces. So there's the first one that was in there. This is University of Texas, San Antonio. I partnered with their sustainability department for trying to do sustainability development and existence in the area. And we've now made beekeeping part of that sustainability, and I run the apiary there. This one will be going in this month. This is at a charter school. We've now going to put a pollination garden and a apiary in at the school, and it's going to become part of their science program. So I'm really excited. That will be the first one in our area that does that. There's another one's going in April, and then these two have been Green Space Alliance areas. We're waiting for them to remove the squatters there before we'll go in. So once the squatters are removed, we'll go in with bees. So I mentioned to you earlier on that it was important to be accepted by the non-believers in the area. So one way to get the recognition from the non-believers was let's go through their certification program. So Texas has a Master Beekeeper certification program that was originally designed off the Florida one, because the old beekeeper came, at least the Master Apiarist came from there. But they've been spent quite a bit of time now rewriting all the programs, all the training materials. It has 4 levels, and it takes at least 5 years to get there, at least. The first level, the apprentice level, is one that requires at least 1 year of beekeeping, and you also have to have your apiary registered with the state. And what the state does with that list of apiaries is if anybody is spraying in that area, they are compelled by law to notify all the beekeepers in the area they are spraying. So the small guys that spray don't bother about that because they can do it under the radar. The big guys have to do it because they're going to be hit not by us, but by the state will come down on them. So the advantage of that is we will get 48-hour notification that they're going to be spraying in that area. Also, they will use it if there are any diseases floating in the area. They'll let us know that there's a preference of certain diseases in the area. So it's actually a good program. Yeah.
How far out from this field does he have to notify? How many miles?
I think it's 20 miles. Yeah. A lot of the spraying is done by air, so 20 miles is not that far.
What do you do with that information? Do you move the bees or close them up so they don't go outside for 2 days? What's the point of them telling you?
What I do is I close up the entrances of the hives, and I keep it closed up for the day they spray and the day that afterwards, and then I release them again after that. And so because they spray by day, we can't force them to spray at night. The smaller farmers are now spraying in the evenings. In the license requirements for them to be able to use the insecticides, one of the things they have to learn about is they are told to spray in the late afternoon. But the farmers that use air spray during the day, we can't do anything about that.
Do you cover them?
Yes. So what we do is we go down to Walmart and we buy these strips of netting, that curtain netting, that's $3 for a strip. Sew down the 2 ends, and that fits over a 6-stack beehive perfectly. And then of course the air can get in and out so they don't overheat. It will fill up with bees in there, that's okay, they're cooling down. And then we just do that the evening before, and then the following night we take it off. 2 nights later we take it off.
Do you water them at all?
Do I water the bees? No. So the apprentice program, you've got to have at least a year's experience, and then you do the apprentice program, which is very simple. There's a practical, you've got to prove you can get into a suit, light a smoker, open a hive, do an inspection. And then they have another session where you've got to identify hive equipment, and then a multiple choice question and answer after that. There's a curriculum that you're given you need to follow. It's pretty flexible. They give you lots of options in terms of journals and books to go through. And we are currently putting together a whole lot of taped lessons that they can do. The advanced is the next level. It's required, you have to be an apprentice for another year. It also requires you to have 8 hours of public service credits. And then you've got to sit through 5 lectures, videotape lectures, plus questions afterwards, and pass those before you can go and write the exam. The master is the next level. You've got to be advanced for at least another year. The master requires you now to have 12 public service credits. You have to have published in local newspapers. You have to be interviewed on the local radio. And then they do something that's quite interesting. They also, maybe step back, in the master program, they've got 8 different channels or pathways you can go. One focuses on honey tasting and competition. Another one focuses on something else. Several of them have a requirement that you've got to become either a master gardener or a master naturalist in the state in order to get to the next level. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get the dissemination of the information around of what's going on. I took the master naturalist one, and I'll tell you why later on. And then the last level, the master craftsman level, is you've got to be a master for another year. There's a whole lot of more exams, but mainly a lot of essay writing. And one of the key requirements is you have to do a research project with one of the local universities on beekeeping. Anything you like, but it's got to be done with the local university. So that's the program. The state also has a guest speaker program for beekeeping. And me, as that outsider that speaks funny, is now finally been allowed to get on there. So it means the state has now recognized that treatment-free is an option. They won't publicly say it, but they've now allowed me into their hallowed halls as a treatment-free speaker. What they've also now allowed me is I'm now part of the state examiner board. So those beekeepers coming through that are now also treatment-free, at least they've got a friend on the other side. I throw a few bit things. It's not just about beekeeping. What we also try and do is educate the people into the biology of the bees, the taxonomy of bees, and then how bees relate into the other insect world. So we're trying to follow some of the principles we got from master gardeners, at least the master naturalist, is we live in a system. You cannot focus on just one individual in that system or one component of the system. You've got to see the impact that it has as a whole. And so even down to the classes we give in the schools, we talk a bit about some of the interesting things. And so this is one slide. It's up here because the kids in school love it. They remember this slide above any else. And the reason why they remember it is because this is what happens inside the abdomen of a bee during summer. And the most important part you've got to watch out for is this rectal area in the back here. You know, that's where it kicks all its waste products and goes out. Well, in winter when it doesn't fly, that's what happens to it. It stores it up. And the kids think this is fantastic. And again, it depends on what age group you're going to which of these slides you put in. But why I'm putting these slides here is because I've never heard anybody at these conferences talk about the biology of bees. And it's an important part to know. It helps you understand why you do what you do with the bees. So this one's in, I do this quite often with the adults. You know, what color is your blood? Red. What color is the blood of the bee? White. Why? Because the blood in the bee doesn't transport oxygen. Why is that? Because the bees feed air directly to the muscle. The whole body is one tube, basically, and there's the bee's heart. So it takes the blood here that's got all the nutrients in there out of the intestine area. It pumps it all the way to the brain, and then it slowly filters back. And the guys think, wow, that's amazing. This is what happens in an insect, and you capture the audience. So it's not just about keeping bees and honey and being stung, but this is actually something that can say, well, that's like us. We've got a heart as well. Now they can start associating with the insect. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to win the hearts and minds of the people around me so they will listen to me about treatment-free. I show this to the kids as well, usually middle school kids. They don't like this one. They think there's something wrong with this one. And the point I really harp on is, once the bee is born, what is the first task it does for the next 2 days? It cleans its own room. Have you cleaned your own room? Well, they laugh like anything. And I'm sure the generational seasoned beekeepers have got this wrong. They've got over here that the guard bees are the second last job they do. That's got to be wrong, because you and I know guard bees are really nasty, don't they? They're irritable, they're grumpy. So what caste in the beehive is old, irritable, worn out wings, grumpy? It has to be the foragers. I think they got this one the wrong way around. It should be the other way around. The last job should be guard duty. They've got nothing to lose. They like that one. The Master Naturalist program is state funded in Texas to try and encourage, it's all over the US, it's not just Texas. They're trying to encourage people to do a lot of citizen science work and to start respecting the environment and start taking some concern of what the environment looks like. I think it's a really good program. And the reason I like it mostly is because they see everything as a system and not as individuals. When I joined them, first of all, I was this guy that was pushing like anything to get bees into the program, because bees was not in their program. It wasn't there. Monarch butterflies they are really great. And then I said to them, well, you know, bats bring about $3 billion worth of value to the farmers in Texas. What do monarch butterflies bring? Nothing. They just cost us. Why are you worrying about them? Do you know what bees bring to Texas? And we're talking about $270 million worth of value to the farmers in Texas through bees because of their pollination. What I've got them to do now, we now run a discovery program. We've got 12 of them, one a month, and we run this in the local parks, and one Pacific one's called What's Buzzing program, and it's all about bees. But I found it very difficult to get the interest in honeybees, although everybody knows they're dying off and there's some problem with them. In Texas, we have 600 different bee species, of which honeybees is only 2 of them. The rest are all native solitary bees or other type of bees. And so this program is helping people discover where are these other bees in their environment and how to look after them. It's not just the honeybee. They also got a guest speaker program, which I'm part of, and then we've started this year citizen science programs where we're looking at tracking bumblebees, ordinary solitary bees, and a couple other things. Earth Day was the first presentation last year on Earth Day. We ran one table on beekeeping. We got the best table reward last year, so we're back again this year. They do an insect expo down there where they get all the schools in the county to go through and look at different insects. Well, the first time we ran this, we only had one table. This last year, in fact, this last week, Julia was with me on that one. We had 5 tables on bees now, different aspects of bees, and it was pretty popular. So we're breaking into the mold.
1,400 neighborhoods.
Yeah. We ran them through in 2 days. As I said to you, the problem I have of beekeeping in Texas is there's not enough food, at least in our area. So I've teamed up with the Native Plant Society to help promote planting for pollinators other than just the monarch butterflies. And through them we were able to get into the Native Seed Company just outside Austin, who now produce a seed pack called Happy Bee? I think it's called Happy Bee. And it's got a bunch of seeds of native plants for them, but it's not just for spring. There's a group of seeds that will germinate in summer and another group that will germinate in fall. So we're trying to give a full coverage of plants and nutrients for the bees over that time period. And that's going pretty well. We set up a seed bomb program, which is what that picture in there is people making seed bombs out of these seeds. Austin City Council now have an annual event which is called Throwing the Bombs, and the weeks before that they get all the schools to make seed bombs, and then on that day that they chose, everybody gets on their bicycles with a pack of these seed bombs and they go down all the cycle paths throwing them out all over the place to try and encourage more pollination plants. You know, bear in mind, Texas was a forest, it now became a monoculture. We then poisoned the hell out of it, and now we're gassing everybody out of it. So we're trying to get things back to what it used to be like. We also now working with them for doing local walks in nature preserves to make people aware of what is available, what isn't available out there. The nature parks in our area have now created catalogues of the insects, of which bees are now a formal part of it, whereas previously they weren't. The people that lead these walks are no longer scared of bees. When they saw bees, they used to run a mile. Now they don't. Now they actually go and have a look at them. They've just created a calendar for planting for bees. Calendar, so tell you for each month of the year, what do you plant? And it's taken us 3 years to get that calendar compiled. Everybody said yes, they would do it, and yes, it's easy, and the information is available. And when you go and look at the information that's available on the internet, it's so generic that it doesn't actually apply to us. We have 11 different environmental areas in Texas, and they are so significantly different along with the soil types that plants from one just don't grow in the others. And the other message I got out to them was, you know, there are 600 different types of bee species in Texas, and bees are very selective in how they pollinate. Certain bees will only pollinate certain plants. So we've got to look after all the bees and not just one specific type of them. And we also wanted to get them to understand that a bee will not visit an individual flower. It's looking for groups of flowers before it'll actually go and visit them, because it'll then only pollinate that species of plant for that on that trip. Just another slide to put in to make it a little less boring. So, you know, we've got bees the size of a quarter down to bees that are less than a millimeter in size in the state. Quite a high variety. So where do we go from here? We've got the recognition now. We've made a dent into the state. We're not quite 100% accepted, but they now allow us to play with them. So this year, what we're pushing the citizen science programs for all the schools. So one of them is on declining biomass, where we collect a biomass over a 24-hour period, look at what we've collected and what the volumes are. There's a lot of data showing that over the last 25 years has been significantly dropping. I noticed that, you know, when I went to Texas for the first time, I would drive from Austin to San Antonio or down to the coast, and my windshield would be absolutely covered with bugs. Now I do the same trip and I hardly ever get a bug on the windshield. This is not there. Bumblebee tracking. So despite that the 6 bumblebees that were put on the endangered bee species was then taken off, we're still doing the bumblebee tracking. A solitary bee program that started this year. We do, in fact, next week. I think it's next week. I do the first presentation with Birds Unlimited, which is a company now that's going to help sponsor us doing this in the state, teaching people about other types of bees and how to behave around them. Then San Antonio got the first awarded champion award for the monarch butterfly certification, which has 25 different elements that you have to comply. One of them is to provide a pollination pathway throughout the city. And that was the birth of what I mentioned was the Green Space Alliance. So they've identified 50 different parks or nature parks they're going to set up around the city, which is either land that the builders don't want, or it's become a dump, or it's in an awkward position, and they'll be rehabilitating those along with the master gardeners and master naturalists. And each of the, well, I think is about 5% of them won't get hives, but all the rest will eventually get beehives, which allows us again to cover the area with the drones that we want to have in the area. We're using these spaces for education for the scouts and the scout groups, the 4-H groups, the FAA groups, the school groups now are doing, coming along for lessons there. We're doing the certifications for all those organizations, so you get your badges for that. So it's become more of a community environment. Again, why we're doing this is to educate people that bees are not the enemy, and by the way, you can keep bees without having to treat. All the hives we put in here are treatment free. Apiary at the charter school, the UTSA, sustainability department. We also want to focus a bit more on propolis production. We've got quite a high number of people that are into alternative medications, and so we're trying to increase propolis production in our hives. Last year we tried vertical propolis nets in the hives. They didn't turn out too well. One of the beekeepers tried by elevating his top lid with a space in it so light got in, and put a screen across the top of it. That was moderately successful, so we're going to try that again this year. We encourage our club members to experiment, and they can use either the apiaries that I've got, for the experimentation if they don't have space for them. We're also working with the companies there that claim they're green. If they could make a statement of green, we sort of pressurize them and say, oh, that means you've got a beehive on your property. And most of them say it's not. Well, I tell you what, we can put one on there for you. And then we charge them for it, and we use that money back again for the education programs that we're trying to run. We also finally got into some of the local municipalities, and we're working with them with their strategies in terms of their parks. What do they plant? Where do they plant them? We're not focusing on putting honeybee hives in them, but we are focusing on trying to improve the solitary bee life in those areas. So, you know, don't mess with Texas, but don't mess with our bees. Some of the popular presentations, so we're generating a list of presentations that people can call from. So when some institution wants a guest speaker, we say, well, we have it. These are the canned presentations we have. Which ones are you interested in? These are the ones that come up, that get requested most often. Whoops. I should have seen that one. The one I like giving is the unforeseen impact of meddling with nature. And in that we talk about the whole effort of upsizing the bees and the impact it has had. And now we're paying the price for that. That one, there were quite a few requests for that one. Another one along the same things, is bigger better? So yeah, in Texas, everything's bigger and better, so are our bees. So we talk a bit about that. That goes quite well with middle school and high schools. On being right size, the STEM programs the school run, the science, technology, what else it says in there, basically focusing on sciences, they like this one, where we say, you know, what is the impact of increasing the size of the bee? Well, if you increase the body size by twice, it increases the weight of the bee by 80 times, and the volume goes up as a cube. So we create a bit of maths around it, a bit of science around that, then we talk about the physics of flying around that, and it makes it into a scientific practical we do with the kids. And then we talk about, you know, if a bee is that big, can its legs sustain that weight? And we do little experiments with matchsticks and things like that, and of course it doesn't. We make sure it doesn't. Another one that's quite popular is, what do bees see? Because bees have a different spectrum that they see than we do, they see things differently. And so we go along into the gardens and we look at the plants and we describe what we see in the plants. Then we go back into the garden with black lights and see what the bees see and the patterns that are on the plants. So that one goes down real. People love that because we always end up going to the gardens afterwards. We're adding a new one now on static electricity in bees. How bees build up static during the flight and then influence the charges around the plants. And then the other one that we're working on at the moment is, can bees learn? So how do creatures learn, and what is the impact of learning? So in this one, we talk about going to bee school. Bees are interesting. That you can actually show a bee an operation, and as long as there's a reward at the end of it, it will mimic your operation. But what is interesting is when you show another bee, that bee doing the operation, they won't just mimic it, they actually improve the operation. And so there's this continuous improvement going on as the bees teach each other what's going on. So that's that part of it. Bees they've got very good senses of smell. So back in East Africa and Mozambique, and also over in Eastern Europe, they use bees to find landmines. So we talk to the kids about how do you train bees to do that and what is the impact of it. There's a program going on in the UK at the moment where they're getting bees to try and sniff out different diseases that people have. One of the busy working at the moment is Alzheimer's. They find when a person starts going Alzheimer's, they start giving off a very musky smell, which the bees can pick up way before any medical test can pick it up. And then drugs. They've taught bees now to smell out drugs. So if you go along the Texas-Mexican border, most of our border posts, they have beehives. And when you talk to them, they say, yeah, the beehives there. What they do is when a truck or somebody comes through with drugs on, and these bees go and land on the side of that truck or car. And then they hang on, we've got another place for you guys to go. So they're using them to try and track what other things are going on. The bees learn, just like the Pavlov methodology, they learn something because there's a reward. But then they pass that knowledge on to other bees, which is interesting. So one of the bits of piece of information I learned when I first came here was some statement that Dee made that, you need to have your hive, your cells in your hive 4.9 millimeter or less in order to start benefiting from the small cell advantages. And my question to her was, you know, is that everywhere? And she dug up this map. Well, she didn't dig it, she told me to go and dig up this map, which is on Bee Source, and I assume it's in her book. I haven't looked for it yet. And it shows you what is the feral size of the bees in your particular area. So there for us in Texas, the cell size according to this map was somewhere between 4.7 and 4.9 millimeter. And that would be the natural size for our particular area. We actually started measuring over the last 2 years of the colonies that we actually cut out in the nature areas. And we find that most of the time they're between 4.5 and 0.7, which is pretty close to what she had there. There could be some measurement error on our side, I wouldn't doubt that. So that confirms that that's where we should be going. And then the first lot of bees we tried, we did try a small cell from Wolf Creek. Unfortunately, we had 100% die out by the end of that summer. And not only in our area, but we also teamed with another group in Houston. They had the same problem. So the next thing is we have to regress bees. So the first round regressing bees, we followed what Dee told us. We went from 5.3 millimeter to 5.1 down to 4.9 wax foundation. And then once they were happy with that, we switched over to the plastic foundation. The second round we tried, we went from 5.3 straight to 4.9. Why? Well, because I ran out of 5.1 foundation. And what we found is reducing the size of the bees wasn't a problem, but what happened is that all those hives that went from 5.3 to 4.9 all requeened themselves within about 3 months of doing that. They kicked out the big queens and started their own smaller queens. These hives didn't flourish the very next year. They took about another year before they actually started flourishing. And now they are strong, boiling over with bees. So that's where we are. The other thing we harp on in our area is the treatment of our local small cell or feral bee is quite different to the European honeybee. These bees don't suffer idiots very easily. You make a mistake and they pack their bags and they get the hell out of there. They abscond very quickly. And they abscond because when you think back, it makes sense. We don't have a year-round nectar flow, so when the food starts to get less, unless you are going to subsidize that food with putting in more pollen or honey, they will leave. And they leave lock, stock, and barrel, and there's nothing left in that hive when they leave. So frequently I get comments from people saying, oh, yeah, my bees died. And I said, how did they die? What's in the hive? And the hive's totally empty. There's nothing in there. They just absconded. There was no food. They left. So we've got to be very conscious as to what food is available and make sure that we always leave enough or have in reserve honey and pollen for them to feed them back to the bees. They're much more sensitive to negative factors. Bumper hive, they will let you know. A sharp tap on the hive, they will let you know. And they're not the lazy European honeybees that send 5 or 10 bees to go and find out who you are and then go and talk, negotiate where they come and sting you. They send 200 out to go and sting you straight away. And then they'll ask questions afterwards. But like how my father brought me up, He gave us a hiding to the 3 boys and then asked us, well, okay, who's the guilty one? By that stage, did it really matter? They build up very early. So we're sitting at the moment. In fact, beginning of this last week, I was seriously doubting whether I was going to be here because the bees are building up so fast. I have to super. I've got to start supering now. We'll do splits this next week for them. You need to be very much more gentle with them. No sudden movements, no bumping of frames, slow, gentle movements, no fast movements around them because that does upset them. But if you are slow and gentle, they're fine. They don't have a problem. They do not do well in hives that are less than 2 boxes. We've tried that. We battled to get them to do anything. So what we ended up doing is combining hives to get to 3+ boxes. And once we did that, that seemed to be the critical point. And now they're flourishing very well. So our hives coming through this last winter, I think the smallest box was 2, was one of the hives. I think only one of the hives was a 2-box hive. All the rest were between 3 and 5.
Deeps?
Deeps. We've standardized on the side. The first year I did deep, brood, and medium, and then I wanted to check a box. I couldn't.
Could you step aside just a little bit? We can't see the screen.
Oh, it's top secret.
Mark, thank you. The widely used method for increase is to create nukes.
But if hives don't do well, unless they're kind of a minimum 2-3 deeps, then your challenge, if you create a nuke, is to get it built up to that critical mass fast enough before you hit that bad part of the year, or
Right.
you probably don't have a chance. So that's going to influence how you do your splits. I'm guessing you probably don't break up a big strong colony into 8 small nukes.
No.
That you have to maintain the critical mass of that colony to be successful. And that's just contrary to what most people are teaching, most people are learning. But I'm seeing it not only in what you're saying, but I'm seeing it a lot of other places.
That's the old way. You walk away split with a full deep of bees, brood, honey, and pollen. And there's no going smaller. That's the old way. You want to have a clean, sustainable commercial output.
So what we're doing with our nukes is, in a 5-frame nuke, we will put in 3 frames of brood and then 2 of honey nectar, pollen on the side of it. And at the moment we're doing walk-away splits because I haven't got queens for them. And as soon as the queen has been fertilized and starting to lay, we put them into 10-frame boxes. And then watch their food so they do build up. And if it comes to the end of winter, end of fall, and they're only sitting with 8 frames or less, we combine the hives because otherwise they're not going to survive. Our bees seem, you know, I'm one of these guys, I'm an engineer by profession, so I'm somewhere between the scientist who's really rigid in their experimentation and the guys who just play around. It does seem that our bees seem to prefer the screen bottom boards on our hives. We seem to get a better success rate, faster build-up rate with screen bottom boards than we do with solid boards. I can think of lots of reasons why, but I have no proof to whether that is actually factual. It's all my own hypothesis. So we do that. Our hives are in sun, morning and noon, and afternoon shade. And we do that because we have a problem with moisture, a big problem with moisture. Our swarm traps, am I running ahead? Yeah, okay. So I told you about the nutrition is an issue. The high humidity and temperature makes it very difficult for our bees to manage the moisture level in their hives. When you're sitting at 99% humidity and 90 degrees, it's very difficult to evaporate water or condense water. And then they leave. So that's the second reason why we find they abscond on a regular basis, is even if there's food and they can't condense that water in there, they leave, they go somewhere else. I found a book called Constructive Beekeeping by Ed Clark. So I peruse all these books that have come out of copyright that are, you know, written around 1900, late 1800s, and you go through those. Now they're free on the internet. This one, he actually talks about this issue in Texas back in the late 1800s. And he talks about the reason for this is the fact that they can't condense the water, they can't get the water content out. And so what the bees do is they choose the northern face of their hive and they varnish it. And then they actually pump the air over that to give the temperature drop so they can get the moisture out of it. And then they take that air and put it back again over the honey to try and get the moisture out of the honey. And then they collect the water at the bottom there, because Texas doesn't have a lot of water. They collect the water at the bottom there so they can eat the honey, dilute and eat the honey. So when we realized that was the case, we made sure that our hives were in sun morning and noon, and then afternoon there was shade on the hives so they could get that temperature drop. We don't have a lot of swarms in our area. The feral bees will live in the hollows in the live oak trees. So if we've got a clump of live oak trees, there will be swarms in there. But as soon as you get out of the live oak trees, we don't find very much. In the town, we do find around about the second half of the year, we will get bees that go into water meters in the ground. But they are so small. You know, we'll take them out and then we combine 4 or 5 of them together to make a hive. We did try Seeley's 20, 30 and 40 litre swarm traps. We put them all over. What we found works in our area is the 40 litre one. Works very well. The others don't. And we have to put them in the shade, in the shade in the tree area. Then we'll catch the swarms. If they're in the sun, we don't get the swarms. Something else we had some fun is, when I started beekeeping, I didn't know when the nectar was going to flow. Nobody could tell me when it was going to happen. They couldn't tell me what was going to happen in the hives. So there's the one hive I had under the bedroom window where I could do lots with, but all the other remote hives I couldn't. So I looked into remote monitoring of hives, and we tried 3 different makes of remote monitoring. And some of them kind of worked. The best one is, here's a picture of the best one. And what we do with this, we use it when we go to schools. We'll talk about bees, then we'll show them some of this. 5 minutes. Yeah.
Just want to let you know it's 12 o'clock, so lunch is starting up above.
What's more important, lunch or listening to me? And be careful how you answer the question.
And then when you come back down at 1 o'clock, you can continue if you want. And then following you will be Carla and then Bruce Brown ending.
All right, I've probably got about 7 minutes to go and I'll be finished, or we could wait until the end.
Okay, well, if you finish in 10 minutes and you don't have to restart at 1, we can come back here at 1:15 or 1:30.
Okay. So we monitor, we used to have 3 hives set up on monitoring. I've reduced it down to 1. The information gets set to a satellite, comes down to the internet, and we can access it on through the internet. And so in the class, we'll talk about the bees and what happens, and then we start showing them what happens on an actual beehive, and then in the afternoon, we take them to the actual beehive that we were watching on the internet, so they can see what's going on. I did a few screen clips of it. Here's one where we are robbed. This hive is robbed. We can see it starting. It happened over a 2-day period, and we lost about 10 kilograms, I think, of honey in less than a 2-day period, being robbed out, and that was the end of that one. Looking at nectar flow here, this purple line is showing a really good nectar buildup. So you get a buildup during the day, and then it drops down at night. And the reason why it drops down is because, anybody know?
Evaporation.
Yes, they're evaporating the water out of the nectar. And so you'll see this drop coming down. Sometimes you see it very significantly, and other times not so much. We're also monitoring flight activity in the hive, so it's picking up various frequencies. It's an algorithm that was created way back in the 1940s and is still working today. But it tells us what's going on. So we expect to see a lot of activity in the mornings when the bees leave. One of the exercises I have for the STEM program kids we do is we give them the hive weight every 15 minutes in the morning, and then the question is how many bees left that hive that morning. And so we can work out the average weight of a bee, we look at the weight drop, and we can then calculate how many bees left in that morning. And then the other things is fanning is another frequency. We watch out fanning. We should expect a higher fanning rate at night when they're busy trying to condense the honey or the nectar. So and there are other things you can look at. These are just some of the ones that we look at. Here's another hive. This is the weight of the hive. So it had a sudden increase, quite a significant increase. Reason being?
Build up?
No, I'd like it to be, but no. We soup it up. Put another super on the hive. So again, don't just take data for what it is. You've got to know what you are measuring and when you're measuring it so you can annotate it. And what I say to the kids every time is, don't ever give me a graph without it being able to annotate it, because it means absolutely nothing. I don't care what the scale is. I don't know what to do with it. Here, this hive actually swarmed. Fortunately, it was just a small swarm that went off, and not a great deal, but we did lose about 20,000 bees in that swarm. We souped it up again a little later on. So it just gives something to it was fun. It gave me a bit of security in my first couple of years of beekeeping, that I had another way of finding out what was going on. I've got to the stage now, and most of you seasoned beekeepers will understand, you can go to a hive, stand next to it, and you know what's going on. You don't need this type of stuff anymore. But it was interesting. So when we came to start trying to sell our honey, we had a huge problem. We were up against the Costco's, the Walmarts, and everybody else that was selling honey between $6 and $8 a pint. And we just looked at ourselves and forget the amount of effort and time we put into it is not worth it. Our packaging is $1 already, and our label is another 50 cents. So we had to educate the population into what is the value of honey, because we needed the money to self-fund all the projects we were experimenting with. And so in a lot of our programs and lectures we gave, we told people, well, how do you destroy honey? Through heat, through filtration, through adding additives to it. The stores are not allowed to sell honey because of company policy that has not been pasteurized, which means it's been heated to 65 degrees. Well, what temperature do all enzymes break down at? 50 degrees. No, you just destroyed it. Oh, and you know, who in the public will buy cloudy honey? Nobody. So guess what? They super filter it. They've just taken out all the pollens that give you the allergen resistance. So it's just sugar water. And by constantly talking to them, we've been able to increase the price of the honey from the $6 a pint. Now we're now selling our honey at about $15 a pint. And we're starting to increase our sales, which is good. So it took a bit of time. We did try things like honey tasters and honey flights and things like that, but I'm afraid our population in Texas is not sophisticated enough for that. So we had to drop that one. Unwanted visitors around the hives. You know, being the writer, I have this influence. I can put a few things that I like in there. So there's my pet rattlesnake. Actually, around our hives we don't get rattlesnakes at all, but we do get coach whips. The coach whips seem to like the warmth underneath the hives, and we get coach whips there. They're not poisonous. They run very fast, so when you come around, they leave. But we get them there. If we do cutouts, there's almost every second cutout I have, there's a rattler there. So we've got to watch out for those. Do you know what this creature is? Wax moth. Yeah. Wax moth. It should be our state moth in Texas. There's so many of them around there. Praying mantis. Praying mantises, we get them living in the top of the hives. They eat bees. So this is a nice source. They live at the top there and they eat bees. Scorpions. We saw a nice scorpion yesterday. Unfortunately, it doesn't have babies on them. But we get scorpions at the top of our hives. And again, they also eat bees. But the number of bees they eat is small, so I don't worry too much about them. Here's a spider that's got a bee, caught a bee and eats the bees. So we get these other insects that reduce our population. You just got to be aware of them when you go into a hive. A lot of swarm removals, some fun, interesting ones. In a lot of masonry, we find swarms built in there. Why? It's nice and cool, and there's always walls that got a gap in the middle. Perfect for them. Falling down trees, we get swarms. Flower pots, overturned flower pots and drums, we get swarms in those. Go and collect duck houses, we pull them out of duck houses there. This is actually a cat house up in a tree. This farmer has the cat house up the tree away from the dogs, and the cat lives up top there. Well, the bees are taking it over. Traditional ones out of trees, and then once in a while we'll actually get a swarm that we can go and pick up. So that's where a lot of our small bees come from. Know your local insects. Even our extension officers don't know the difference between a bee and a wasp, so we have to do a lot of education. These are wasps. This is the one I get frequently called. It's the most mistaken one. Everybody thinks this is a bee. It's actually a Mexican honey wasp. It builds a nice big, do I have a picture of it? No, I don't. It builds a nice big paper nest up in the trees. It does actually make honey, and the honey is very sweet and almost white. They live very happily with people. They don't sting you too much. And when I get called to do it, yes, I'll put a veil on my face, but then you go in and you just cut it from the branch and take it down, and you get 3 or 4 stings, and that's it, and then take it somewhere else. But educating people on what is a bee and what is a wasp becomes compulsory in all our courses. Mind my saddlebags. I have a mission to turn Texas into treatment-free bees. That's it.